As a wise Frenchman once wrote, hypocrisy is the homage that vice pays to virtue. But when dictators, even in this fraudulent way, acknowledge the basic truth that the right to rule comes from the consent of the governed, the door to freedom begins to crack open, and it can't very easily be closed again. The world is in the midst of a democratic revolution that was foretold by the creation of the United States.
In 1776, America first declared its independence. Our Constitution was first written in 1787, but by 1791 it was clear that it needed some amendments. The first of these, and the most important of them, is the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Unfortunately, according to a recent survey done by the Washington Post, more than 1 in 3 American citizens could not name a single right guaranteed to them under the First Amendment. What effect do you believe lack of free speech had in the past?
The United States, even prior to being the United States, had free speech. That was, as you well know, one of the issues that we were dealing with in the Revolution. Their complaint that they weren't being heard in Parliament. And by not being heard in Parliament, they had representatives, but the representatives were not speaking the voice of the people.
Well, in this country, we've gone to war over it. The Revolutionary War, I mean, it may not have been fought specifically over free speech, but clearly that was on the minds of the Founding Fathers because it was one of the first things that they wrote into our new Constitution.
From the very beginning, the Pilgrims themselves, with the Mayflower Compact, came up with a way for everybody's voice to be heard. It's just innate in the United States.
And I think that's where we saw part of the, the American Revolution is that that lack of representation, that lack of free speech over in Britain made it hard for the Americans in the colonies here to be represented and to be taxed fairly. And so had it not been for that lack of representation, I don't know that they would have had the impetus to come and start this beautiful country that we now see as America.
Right now we're pretty free with our speech. As a matter of fact, it's gone beyond speech. It's now free expression, including burning our flag. So we have more freedoms than probably most countries in the world.
The court case of Texas v. Johnson is one of the most significant cases in U.S. history. In this case, the Supreme Court ruled that burning the flag in protest was covered under the First Amendment.
I think it was great that basically I think the Supreme Court was in a position where they were forced to back off. I think they got caught in a bind where had they ruled against me, it would have been very blatant to many people in this country that I was being suppressed and imprisoned precisely for making anti-patriotic statement with the flag.
I think one's rights end where another person's begin. So as long as you're not violating somebody else's right or suppressing somebody else's right, I think you have the right to express yourself the way that you see fit. Once we start limiting the expressions of people, then it doesn't become free speech.
So I think that regulating journalism and requiring it to at least be based in fact and truth would limit that kind of impact that we have. You can't just push racist ideologies.
It is easy to protect speech you agree with. It is harder to protect speech you abhor. The First Amendment is not so much about protecting speech that is easily agreed to. It is about tolerating speech that is an abomination.
In a recent controversial case, a school in Wisconsin was unable to punish students for doing a Nazi salute in their class photo, as it was protected under their First Amendment rights. Other recent controversial cases regarding the First Amendment include net neutrality and Kaepernick kneeling during the national anthem.
We do have freedom of speech. We have had freedom of speech for a long time. I think the LGBT community has not had that. If that were to be restricted, I think we'd be taking a step back. And probably there are things that are not said today that, in 10, 20 years we'll be thinking, people should be able to express themselves and say what they think.
Losing freedom of speech would obviously negatively impact that community drastically. Because I feel like the LGBT community still does not have as many freedoms as we have who aren't part of that community.
To what extent does the First Amendment contribute to an American identity?
I don't necessarily think there is a single American identity. I think that's what makes this country so beautiful and so successful, is that we all have such different stories and we come from different backgrounds, and I guess in that sense the First Amendment is really important because it protects our identities and it protects our differences.
I have a hard time seeing us going back from where we're at. You know, if the government tried to regulate that, I don't know that we as a population would allow it. You know, it's like once you've opened that door, I don't know that you can go back.